Hello, I'm Cindy Howes. Oh man, exciting times today on Basic Folk because Ellis Paul, the one and only. This has been a long time coming. The Maine native is famous for helping establish the Boston songwriter sound in the late 80s, 90s, and 2000s. He grew up on a potato farm and became a national track star. Ellis started learning and playing guitar after an injury sidelined him. He began seeking out open mics and came across Club Passim in Harvard Square, Cambridge, where he now holds the record of the most shows played there ever. We talk about the early days, playing over 200 shows a year, Woody Guthrie, living with Dupuytren's syndrome, and how that has affected his playing. Ellis Paul has been a favorite of mine for a long time, and it was great to be able to prepare for this interview and to listen to all his songs again, including his latest album, the Storyteller Suitcase. We actually talk about a couple of standouts on that album, including a song where he explains the afterlife to his 5-year-old daughter, which, oof, Ellis Paul, nice work. Thanks for listening, and hope you enjoy our conversation. We're going to take a listen to that song I was just talking about from his new album. Here's Ellis Paul, The Innocence and the Afterlife, and then we'll get to our conversation on Basic Folk.
This is my true life story of karma and coincidence, of the afterlife and innocence of a child and my father's ghost. My father slipped into the sweet forever after, surrounded by tears and laughter. He stepped into the great unknown, into the afterlife. Oh, the mysterious afterlife.
All right, Ellis Paul, here we go. Thanks for talking to me today.
I'm happy to be here. I've been waiting for a long time to have a chance to do this because I've heard a few of the interviews you've done and they're great.
Oh, really? That's cool. Yeah. You were born and raised in northern Maine, up near the Canadian border, and grew up on a potato farm. What was your hometown like, and what is the history of your family and that potato farm? Because it runs a few centuries back, right?
It does, yeah. I consider Presque Isle, Maine to be my hometown. It's right in the middle of Aroostook County, and northern Maine it's not like what you think of when you think of Maine. It's rolling country, trees, and potato farms. There's no ocean anywhere.
Is it like Secret Ireland?
Well, kind of, yeah, without the drama of the landscape. It's more rolling hills like upstate New York, Vermont. It has that kind of vibe, but it's not lighthouses and lobster boats. It's tractors and trees, pretty much for miles and miles. So yeah, I grew up there, family farm, which we just put up for sale, actually. It's in Washburn, Maine.
That's a big deal.
It is, yeah. We owned it since the 1860s. A relative named Wesley Plessy, he served in the Civil War, and he was given that land as part of his, payment for serving in the Civil War. So it's been in the family for a long time, but we no longer farm it. And my mom is actually the principal owner now, and she's in assisted care. So we're getting rid of it in order to help pay for some of her expenses. So, but yeah, it was an interesting life. I grew up in Presque Isle. My grandparents owned the farm at that time, and I spent a lot of time just picking rocks out of the field and then picking potatoes and doing it for various farmers, including my grandfather. So it was a lot of hard labor.
Have you and Susan Warner had conversations about farming?
Yeah, we have. I think she was on a dairy farm or a pig farm. I can't remember which, but she grew up in Iowa, similar kind of circumstances. But I feel like it was more of a small town upbringing, more so than like a farm upbringing.
Big farm, yeah.
I still lived in town, but was there every weekend working when I needed to be in.
How often did potatoes come into your home directly? It was the family business, but what were your feelings about potatoes? And what are they like now?
Yeah, well, my father ended up being the state of Maine potato commissioner. It's like the government position that oversees the production and promotion of Maine potatoes. And he was actually a potato scientist. So
Wow.
he came up, he invented hybrids of potatoes and did research on potatoes throughout my childhood. So if I wasn't on our family farm, I was floating around with him, like helping him do all of his experiments and science stuff. And when he was in the government job, helping him put labels on things and stuff in envelopes and that kind of stuff. So potatoes were like, it was a daily thing. We had them on the plate in every variety of potato you can imagine. Potato pancakes, potato candy, French fries, tater tots, baked potatoes, mashed potatoes, just it goes on. My mother kind of disguised the fact that it was happening, but it was pretty much the only thing we ate with a couple other things,
Right. What was your favorite potato dish?
Oh, the favorite potato. I just like a great baked potato, honestly. Yeah. And mashed is great. They're all great. It's just, as a kid getting it every single day, I think at some point you feel like you're being tortured. So I did take a break from them once I got out of the house, but now they're pretty routine in my life.
So what was it like for you to work on the farm, and how do you think that experience shaped your personality?
Wow. Well, there's a lot of isolation working on a farm. You see these farmers out in the fields doing a lot of the work themselves because they're on tractors and they use mechanics to do their job. And, some of my best memories of just like pulling a truck out in the middle of the field, filling the back of it with rocks, because you have to clear the fields every summer of stones because that messes up the machinery and stuff. So just being out there alone, and just nothing but shorts on and just working from like 9 a.m. till 5 p.m.
Doing the rocks.
Yeah. And the isolation of that. But, I got to know my grandfather pretty well. And I have a couple good stories about the time with him that I spent there. And so it means a lot in hindsight. But I think the isolation of doing a job by yourself, and that lines up pretty nicely with being a folk musician.
Did that translate to loneliness or just something that you got used to?
Maybe a little bit. I've always been someone that functions pretty well in my head. I think folk music is what brought me out of myself. I think I was pretty shy when I was 20, 21. But by the time I was 30, I was a raging narcissist like most folk singers are.
So you didn't start listening to folk music seriously until you were a little bit older in college. And when you were younger, I read that you listened to Top 40 radio. But where else was music in your house growing up? And how was music treated in your family?
I come from a very musical family. Like we weren't afraid to sing in front of each other. There was no embarrassment in that. So if we were running down the highway in the car with my dad, he would frequently just break into a song, usually something from the 50s, and then we would all chime in. So the music was just present all the time. And they were very, very supportive around my creativity in my teens. And when reality kicked in and I was 25 and I was quitting my job to start doing this, of course, they were freaking out and telling me to slow down and stop and think about grad school and all these things. And so they did try and shut it down a little bit, which I think is a normal parental thing because you're worried about your kid and you want them to do better than you did. And they were afraid that I wouldn't be able to pull off a living doing it.
Wow. Yeah. It just must have been at some point after it, because it just seems like your career after a while just took off, that they couldn't deny that this was destiny.
It was a nice thing. Especially, there were a few movies that were starting to kick in that were going to be, big Hollywood movies, and my music was in them. And so that gave them, their perception of the music. They just weren't, they're not of our world, our folk community at all. They're Republican. They're on the other side of the aisle on almost everything. And I'm sure they were looking at me like I was an alien at times. And they didn't have an understanding of the folk music thing. My father thought if he said a song out loud into a room that I would be able to play it with my guitar. He would say, "Hey, play the Sinatra song," and I would be like, "I have no idea how to play that." And I think getting songs in movies and checks that had a comma in it, all of those things were important landmark things. And trust me, once I had success and they came out to shows and, I brought them to the Red Sox game that I sang the national anthem at, and they came to a couple shows at the Somerville Theater that were sold out in Boston. And that finally calmed them down, and they started to get that, he's going to be okay. And then eventually, I think I'm, probably even right now making more money than my parents did growing up. So it's been great.
So let's go back to the 1960s. Can you talk about your mom's TV show?
Oh my God. How did you find this stuff? This is amazing.
I just read everything.
Yeah, my mother had a little local TV show, on life at home and, eating well. And
how do you say the name of your county?
A rustic homemaker. Yeah.
It's so funny that she was making a TV show about being a homemaker when she was like a high up potato executive.
Well, my dad was, yeah. She was, I guess she was a dietitian is what her training was coming out of college. So, and in those years in college, they were stressing home ec as, what a woman was supposed to. Fortunately, now y'all can be doctors, lawyers, and hopefully vice presidents. And, but the box was limited back then. So I'm glad that she did that, though. It was a good way for her to get out of herself. And she had a good career as well as a dietitian up in Maine and in the Midwest. We lived in the Midwest for a little while.
Whereabouts?
Both in Minnesota and in North Dakota, which is fertile potato country at Red River Valley. So Fargo and East Grand Forks, in those areas. I spent 6 years as a Midwesterner. Then we moved back to Maine.
You were a track star. You were a state champion and you traveled all over the country for competitions. Where did your interest in running come from? And again, when did you start and what is the history of athletes in your family?
There's no history of athletics in my family. I think my dad might have played basketball. He was upset when I told him I wasn't going to try out for the 7th grade basketball team or 8th grade basketball team because
Dad,
band was getting in the way.
With trumpet, right?
Yeah, trumpet, yeah. And he looked at what's wrong with you? Because, basketball was the big sport where I grew up. They didn't have football team because the ground is rock hard in October, so you can't play football in northern Maine. Otherwise, it's like playing football on concrete.
Oh, geez.
So they don't have football teams. They have soccer teams, but basketball is the big sport. But yeah, I said, no, I could do track in the spring because that doesn't interfere with any band stuff or stage band stuff. And I could do cross country in the fall because it's over by the time all the band stuff really starts. So I did that. And, there are these presidential fitness things that you do when you're in 6th grade. How many pull-ups can you do and how many sit-ups and how fast can you run a quarter mile? How fast can you run a mile? And I was off the charts in the running stuff. So that showed me that this is a sport that my body was meant to do. I couldn't do many pull-ups, sit-ups, lifting weight and nothing, but I was always miles ahead of everybody running. And so I knew I had an aptitude based on those tests. So when I got to high school, I joined the high school team, and I was immediately the best runner on the team, even as a freshman. And eventually won states. I finished second in the country in cross country when I was 16 years old for, a national championship kind of thing, and got scholarship offers. And it's still part of my daily life. I still follow the sport really carefully and still jog.
What's your event?
It was like the 5K. Mile 5K, 10K.
So you were able to get a track scholarship to Boston College. And what was the move like from small town northern Maine to Boston?
It was pretty smooth. BC is out in the suburbs of Boston, so it wasn't like it didn't feel like a real urban environment out there. It felt pretty safe. But it took me a while to get my bearings on every front, both academically and running wise. I was going on to a team suddenly where I wasn't. I was one of the top 5 runners, but I wasn't necessarily going to be the number one guy there. So it's there was some teeter-tottering and losing a little bit of interest and focus on the sport and just doing it sort of as a part of college, not as the reason I'm in college, but as sort of a secondary reason to figuring out who I am and what I want to be.
You were sidelined by an injury in your junior year and were given a guitar. I'm wondering, like, what the connection was like to the instrument, and how has your relationship been like with the guitar over time?
Oh, there was magic right off the bat. I think anyone that is lucky enough to be able to walk through a few chords fairly quickly knows that what a gift it is to hear music and play music, and the vibration of the guitar is going into your body. It's going into your ears. You're holding it against your body as you're playing. So there's all sorts of magic in that relationship. And it's, at this point, it's become an extension of my body. And I feel like, you know how when you're turning a car and you're just probably millimeters away from another car when you're pulling into a space or something, but you know your car and the dimensions of it so well that it feels like an extension of who you are. That's how a guitar can be. And it took me a long time to get it to that point. And I learned how to play by writing my own songs. I learned maybe 10 songs by other people, and I started writing. And if there's any one thing that I could go back and change, that would be the first thing. It would be to learn 100 songs instead of 10. So I had a better chord vocabulary, and it's one reason why I'm enjoying this this time off during the pandemic, because I'm learning songs in my isolation here at the house. I'm learning how to play all these songs I've never learned how to play before, and it's really, really been fun.
What have you been learning?
Well, last week I did. I have a show on Facebook every week. It's called Ellis Paul's Traveling Medicine Show, and there's always a theme. Last week's theme was The Wizard of Oz. So I learned Over the Rainbow, and I wrote my own arrangement to it, like throwing in chords that were unique to my version. And I learned how to play If I Only Had a Brain on the banjo. And then I learned to play Elton John's Goodbye Yellow Brick Road and Tin Man by the band America. Both were hits in the 70s. So I did those two songs and then two songs that were related to it. And, and when else would I learn those songs?
Right.
Except now. And what a gift. The chord changes are so beyond what I would ever do. And I'm hoping that by playing them and learning them and maybe even recording them, I'm thinking of doing an album of some of these cover songs, that it'll seep into my own music after the pandemic's over. And and I'll be a better guitar player, better songwriter.
Can you talk about singing as a young person? What did you think of your voice when you first started singing? Were you a naturally good singer? You have such a remarkable voice. Is it a thing that runs in your family?
Thank you for that. Whether it's good or not is like, it's whether you like amber ale or pale ale, or an IPA or margarita. It's just a matter of taste, I guess. But I had an unnaturally high voice coming up in my early 20s. I had a pretty high range. I don't know if it was 4 octaves or not, but it was definitely over 3. But I sounded like a choir boy. There was no character to it. The thing that enamored me about singing was just the feeling of it. And, in those early years of just sitting in a pretty confined space and listening to myself as I was singing, and that remarkable thing that happens when notes are going out and they're coming back in. And especially if you're in like a sort of echoey, cavernous space, it just felt good. It was healing and soothing and pretty to my ears. But it took me a long time to get out of the choir boy thing and sing with character. And now that I'm in my 50s and I've lost that top end range, and even my speaking voice shows the damage of 5,000 shows, the scratchiness and the airiness that you're hearing. This is not the voice I talked with when I was 25. This is the 55-year-old me talking. And I can't comfortably do a lot of the songs I wrote back then without, moving the capo position off the guitar entirely. Like I literally can drop keys now 4 steps in order to sing some of that older stuff. But when I'm writing now for myself, I have to write for the voice I have presently. And so I think the people that love my voice love it heartily. It goes right between their eyes.
Losing an octave for a singer, that must be like a pretty big deal. So what was that grieving process, or, what was that loss like for you?
It's been tough, emotionally tough. The saving grace of it is that, Tom Waits and Bob Dylan and Woody Guthrie, all who sing like a door hinge and manage to do okay with good songs. And, in me accepting that I don't have the tone and I don't have the control. So I'm not like a violin player that can do things that I could have done really, really beautifully and so easily, that I took for granted, by the way. And had I taken better care of my voice in my 40s, I wouldn't be in the position I am now. So yeah, it's been tough, and listening back to some of these older recordings and hearing myself do things that I know I can't do anymore, it's been hard. And again, it's like, you just write with what you have. And so the songs going forward, I'm hopeful about them, and I want to write more and more and more, because I feel like I have another 20 years on this career of mine. And, but this is going to be the voice I have. So, I just have to write and find beauty within it and find ways to maximize the emotional content of it, even though I don't have the tools that I had when I was 30 and even 40.
So when you started playing guitar, you learned 10 songs, but then you also really started seriously listening to folk music for the first time around that time, like listening to a station in Boston that was playing all these great folk hits. What was that process like for you, and what resonated with you?
I think hearing people like Joni Mitchell and Dylan and Neil Young, at a time, it was the mid-early 80s, I guess, probably mid-80s at that point. So all these classic hit stations started appearing across the country, playing songs from the 60s and early 70s. And Boston had one. And so I was hearing Dylan and Neil Young in a different kind of context. I still Neil Young can stop me in my tracks. I love his voice. He just makes you focus in, and you're taken someplace. And it really moved me, and that's kind of what I wanted to be. I don't think I ended up being that. I think people are into me for different reasons, but yeah, he really moves me. He'd probably be my desert island choice above the Beatles and above all the other bands. I think I'd probably take him.
I like that for you.
Who would you take?
One artist?
Yeah, just one person.
I would take the band Haim.
Cool. I can't blame you.
I mean, and then if it's a person, I would take Bob Dylan.
Yeah, Dylan would be up in my top 5 for sure. But I like Neil Young, just this tone of his voice. I don't know. I could hear it every day and not get tired of it.
That's true. All right, let's talk about Woody Guthrie.
Yeah.
You have a lifelong admiration for Woody Guthrie. You have the famous tattoo on your shoulder. You were drawn to the social consciousness in his work, and you said he would write visually, painting with words. He doesn't dictate, which is what bad folk singers do. Can you expand on that and how Woody was a witness in his writing and how you strive to do the same?
Well, Woody was a reporter, and he wasn't about presenting fake news. He was about just, hey, I'm gonna show you what happened, and you're gonna come to your own conclusions about. He was never heavy-handed morally. You knew a stance going in. If you were a fan of his, of course, you're gonna know that he's swinging from the social justice, commie side of things, so to speak. But even with a song as simple as This Land Is Your Land, it's about painting a picture, creating an argument, so you come to the conclusion without it being told to you that the world is unjust for these people, that these people need help. They're in a situation that's broken and it needs to change. And he was a master of that, an unerring master of it. Every time he picked up the pen, he went there. And which, for my other favorite songwriters like Bob Dylan and that crew, the Beatles and all, they were often just trying to write the swimming pool. They had commercial aspirations that weren't about education, that weren't about making the world a better place. It was about making their lives better. So they would make some decisions that were, which are totally fine, by the way. I'm all for all of it. But Woody just like commitment to the truth and to social justice and to consistently, go after making the world a better place. It just was very inspiring for me. Not that I follow that path, by the way, but it's what I love about him.
One important opportunity you got was to open for legendary musician Bill Morrissey, who became kind of a mentor for you. And in particular, this sounds like something I would do, but I was happy to read that you were like really proactive in getting Bill to share music with you in the form of in like the most influential folk music created. How did the music he shared with you impact your musicality?
There's no like school you can go. You can say the Berklee College of Music or any college of music is a great thing for you to do if you want to become a musician, songwriter, and all that. But the truth is, there's nothing that can show you how to be an artist. There's no real school for that. It's just you only can learn to be that thing by doing that thing and by being around other people who are really good at it and learn from them. And having Bill in the neighborhood was like having Van Gogh in the neighborhood, And you could knock on his door, and whatever state that he might be in, he wanted to share. He wanted to share knowledge, and he wanted to make you laugh, and he wanted to make you think. And he was just a very giving guy. And he came to see my show, and he asked me if I'd be willing to let him produce my first album. And I was like, yeah, yes. Yes. And so we basically lived together for a few months, and he brought in Patty Griffin, and he brought in Duke Levine, and all these people I didn't know that he knew, and who became friends of mine and supporters of mine. And it was just a beautiful thing. I mean, and I've made a vow since that time to do the same thing for young people coming up. Made it part of my mission as a musician to mentor people actively. Like, I don't know that Bill was actively seeking me out. He really wanted to produce somebody he thought was great. And I think he had as much interest in learning how to be a producer as he did working specifically with me. It could have been almost anybody, but and he was really the best songwriter in the country at that point in my mind. He could do things with a lyric and a concept of a song that I only dreamed about. And I learned a lot both by just the example of him where he wasn't trying to do anything, but he was just being Bill. And then by the stuff that he shared with others, about Tim Hardin in particular. He turned me on to Tim Hardin, and just that one thing alone was enough to make me say thank you. And then his experience coming up, and Tom Rush and all these other people that he'd been involved with throughout his life, and hearing the story of them and who they are, and finding out about their music and how he put together an album. He basically produced my record, and how he chose the players, what he said about the players and who they were. It brought Johnny Cunningham in, who was probably the best Celtic fiddle player in the world. And so he just basically just kicked doors open for me that, it was like the difference between being in The Wizard of Oz in that black and white moment to the opening of the doors. And
right.
The Technicolor comes in, and Bill's the guy that opened the door for me. He was like the king of the Munchkins.
Oh my God. That's a great visual.
Yeah.
Someone that you have a very special friendship, and I think it's like so nice as like a fan of both of you and watching your, interactions and friendships over the years, is Vance Gilbert.
Yeah.
And you guys performed together, written songs about each other, recorded an album. What makes your connection to Vance so strong? And also maybe how do you make each other's music better?
Oh, the personal connection is, I just love him. He's funny as hell. He's insightful. I met him probably in the early 90s. I was out of college for a few years. He showed up at this kind of like, by saying guerrilla open mic, I mean, really, it was held in this foyer of this little building in Boston, and illegally, like it
like
wasn't
a coat closet.
kind of, yeah. Like you'd walk up the stairs, and there were there's a room, and it's a fairly large room, and then there's doors all around the room that had little businesses, like little newspapers and, little comic book places, but just a small, probably, I don't know, maybe 70 feet by 40 feet. It was like a giant hallway, really, and we would gather there for an open mic. And Vance came in one night, came up the stairs, and I've been going to it every week, and watching him just knock everybody flat, because he had a skill set that no one really had. He was playing in jazz clubs, so he was all over the fretboard, and he sang like an angel. And he was funnier than everybody in between songs. And so we became friends that night, and we had this sort of shared experience of walking up the ladder of a career together. He got signed to Rounder Records. I got signed to Rounder Records. He started touring with, Sean Colvin, playing all over the country. I started playing all over the country, and we would play songs for each other back and forth. And if he was setting the bar at 6 feet, I had to jump at 6'1", and then he'd come back with a 6'2" jump, and it was that kind of thing where we're kind of. We have a friendly competition, but we're also supporting each other, trying to get the most of each other. And we ended up eventually doing an album together and touring together. And we've done quite a few shows together over the years, but nothing around the album. We did a national tour, and we haven't done anything like that for over a decade. But there may be a time when we do it again.
Time to get the guys back together.
Right. Let's get the band back together, man. Yeah, see, he's fun. And I still every week, he was on my show last week, and we're still supportive of each other's endeavors and bouncing ideas off and commiserating when things get hard and celebrating when things are great. And that's a true friend.
Okay, I don't know how this question is going to land, but we'll give it a shot.
I like that. Well, you just increase the size of the target by introducing it like that, so it's going to land.
Right. Well, an element that appears in your music quite often, and I'm not talking about thematically, I'm just talking about sonically and then also thematically, is romance. And I want to know more about that aspect for you. Your music has this romantic feel to it, but I'm interested in was it a choice to work that into your sound? Do you consider yourself a romantic?
Am I a romantic? I guess I'm a romantic storyteller. That would probably be fair. If someone was going to be putting that on my gravestone, that would likely be the first thing they'd say. There are elements of social justice and, talking about things outside of love, and certainly love songs are only maybe a smaller portion of right? They're not every single song is about love, but it's a constant theme. But what I've learned how to do is I have a song called Rose Tattoo. And it's about a guy that loses his job. And it was written in 2008 during that depression era that we went through. And he's driving home, and he calls his wife and said, I just got laid off, and it's a Monday. And I started writing songs, love songs and things. And in the backdrop of those love songs, there were bigger issues going on. And that's how it's kind of developed over time, that I'm still writing love songs, but I'm framing them in broader issues and talking about people's lives outside of it and how important love is in the middle of it all. And I think in my early days, I would just write about my own experience with romantic relationships, and perhaps I just ran out of relationships to write about, and I had to expand and go elsewhere, because when you're diving in as a songwriter, you're diving into this well of experience, and the first few feet of it are your parents and your friendships that you have and the loves that you've had in your life. Once you run out of those songs and you've mined them all, you start looking at the bigger picture of what's the universe? What's left in the well? Oh, well, the well actually grows exponentially at the bottom, because you start writing about the greater issue and the whole and the universal. And it's not just about your love experience, it's about how a love experience speaks to everyone in a universal way. And, and my favorite songs are love songs. I mean, even a song like Hey Jude is a love song, even though it's written to a kid. Yesterday is a love song. I just love songs, I guess.
That's what's so cool about having writers and artists around to be able to focus on those relationships and reflect, because people who are not like able to express themselves, it's like,
Yeah.
it's really like a great thing that writers are doing by examining that.
Yeah, you're giving voice to people that can't quite get it in words, but then they take ownership of your song. They say, that's my song. They didn't write it.
Yeah.
But you own that piece of their life, and so they feel like they own the song as well. And that's the beautiful thing about the art form. I think the one thing we all have in common, Cindy, is just we share love. Like we all die, we all are born, we all die, and we all share love and with someone. And because that's a universal experience that we all do, that, writing those songs seems to really hit people over the head, because it's something we all go through.
I'm always interested to talk to people who are kind of like banging the drum for progressive issues in the 90s, when like the 90s were so weird. I feel like at the time we were like, yeah, the 90s. And then you look back and kind of cringe at what was going on. But you were writing in the 90s about racism, gay issues, and also just like a lot of vulnerable stories about people who were like pretty lonely. Your songs are sensitive and emotional. And it seems like, from my perspective, like the mainstream mentality has kind of caught up to this culture of kindness that's appeared, like popularity in like normalizing therapy and meditation and mindfulness, and just like, if you are depressed, maybe you could take some medication to try to help yourself instead of just like keeping your nose to the grindstone.
Yeah.
But as someone who's been singing about feelings for so long, how have you observed people's approach to open-heartedness over time?
Yeah, we're in a different world now, and I think thank God for millennials and the environment that they are going to be bringing to leadership. We're right at the cusp right now of kicking the last of the Playboy baby boomers out of that generation of where it's white male.
Just got one really big one to kick out right now.
Yeah, he's like holding on for dear life. You can feel the
like
nails.
The death throttle.
Yeah, and aside from all the issues that he has politically and even personally, personality-wise, it's that controlled white men, misogynistic and racist and all of those things that go along with that. I feel like the generation that came after me, I'm a baby boom Generation X cusper. I'm considered to be born in the first month of Generation X, but I feel like I'm more of a boomer based on life experience. But
I'm an elder millennial.
Oh, you are?
Mm-hmm.
Is that a real thing?
Yes.
That's what wow.
An Xennial is what we're called. Yeah.
I think the Generation X folks are supposed to be sort of the punkers. They were like, they were sort of the post-disco era. And the baby boomers kind of flowed into that disco thing. And then you guys came in the 90s, right? I guess whatever that era is where you guys came of age. And now you guys are hitting 40.
Mm-hmm.
And you and the Zoomers and all the other Generation Z, and you're being raised in this really interesting thing to watch. And you can see it in the streets with all the protests. It's just this acceptance. Like there's this understanding, I feel like, that everybody's life is going to be, we have to make it have equal value. That's almost part of the code of those generations compared to ours, where it was sort of the me generation, But it's nice to see. So, all of these themes that I was singing about in the 90s were just kind of ignored. Like I had a song called She Loves a Girl which I thought was the best song on that record to be a single.
Is that Translucent Soul?
Yeah, and Translucent
98.
Soul, and it just didn't get any traction. And then I got a song in a movie on that album, and then it became the biggest song of my career. And the song I wrote about my friendship with Vance, you know, in folk circles, even they were accepted, but they weren't embraced. But nowadays, it's like the conversation we're all having on a daily basis. In the 90s, it would be the conversation you would ignore or poo-poo. And now it's a conversation happening every time the television is turned on, every time you turn the internet on. And I think it's really hopeful and exciting. And, you know, I write about those things when they hit my life and when I see them in a personal way. And then I can write about them. I can't just tackle a subject and write about it if I'm not hit by it personally, because then I don't have an inroad. So I don't often write about those things, but they do come up every year. I'm writing a few of those songs. And so, you know, but nowadays those songs would probably be like, okay, well, I can just watch TV and hear about this as well. It's not like you're bringing any new information to it.
That's not true.
But it is amazing though, isn't it? Like every time you turn on the TV, it's about, wow, we're talking about racism. We're talking about sexism. We're talking about, look at all this stuff. Like, it's the upside is maybe we're finally dealing with it. Maybe we're recognizing where it's popping out, and maybe we can be like the whack-a-mole and just whack it back down.
So I got to ask a question for my mom, who is so excited I'm talking to you today.
Nice.
So she started getting into musicians when I went to Emerson and started doing the coffee house and started playing yourself and Laurie McKenna and
great times.
You know, all those, yes, incredible time. So, you know, September 11th happened, and then WERS Coffee House started playing your song Angel in Manhattan. Like, it seems like 4 times a day we would play it, you know. So it became a big thing, and it was something that I think a lot of people latched onto in terms of just being so lost and scared in that time, and it definitely was something that helped. So that's a song that she's really taken with. So if you would, could you tell the origin of that song?
Sure. Yeah. And the odd thing about that song, it's kind of like a love song in that I was brokenhearted and my marriage had just broken up. So I had to get out of Nashville where I was living at the time. And I went to New York City, and my manager met me in New York City and, you know, duct taped me together, took me out to dinner. And we were sitting at this outdoor cafe on Lafayette Avenue in New York called the Time Cafe. And I was just a mess sitting there, you know, just sulking and just in my own head and kind of in a scary way. Like it wasn't a good time to be me. And I finally got up and I walked around the square alone, came back, sat down at the cafe with them, and this giant bicycle wheel pulled up next to me, and it was like a 6-foot-high bicycle wheel. And I turned around, and it was one of those old-fashioned tricycles with a huge front wheel. And there was this person on the bike. I didn't know at the time, but his name was Baby D. And Baby D had wings and cat ears, and he was hauling a symphony-sized harp behind the bicycle. And he was a street performer. And he turned around and started playing, and it was completely beautiful and mesmerizing. And he played 3 songs, I think. He was a street performer, so he just was going from cafe to cafe. I don't know if I should be calling him a she or not. I'm not sure whether a transition had been made at that point, so forgive me, Baby D. We've become friends since this, so I think he would be cool with that. So I didn't know who it was, but for those 15 minutes that he was playing, my internal world disappeared. All the pain and everything that I was hyper ruminating on just disappeared, and I just got lost in the visual and the beauty of the music that was being played. And then he rode off, and And I'm like, wow, that was amazing. And look how centered he was and how content he was and how able he was to just give me a moment like that. And like, if he can be happy, what the fuck is my problem? Like, why do I perceive so many barriers in front of my life right now when someone like that can exude that kind of courage and beauty and exist? So I ended up writing this song about this angel that falls to earth in New York. I don't mention Baby D. I don't mention any of that stuff, but that was the inspiration for why I wrote it. Because the wings and, you know, the whole thing. And the whole song is about finding faith. When it's right in front of, there's an angel right in front of you, and still you doubt, and still you doubt, and still you doubt. And then the hopefulness of it happening. And, you know, the song happens on a Tuesday. 9/11 was on a Tuesday. And I think our faith was being challenged. So stations in Boston, yours, ERS, and, FUV in New York City, and all these other places started playing the song. I had no idea they'd see a connection, but there it went. And it was a beautiful thing to watch unravel.
I was actually on the air when it happened.
Oh, wow.
And I was like a 19-year-old, had to announce it on the radio, and I didn't know what to do. And I grabbed your CD and put it in. And
No kidding.
I played it right after.
Did you really? You were probably the first person to do that. Wow, that's amazing. 'Cause that ended up kind of sweeping the country there for a moment. And thank you for thinking of it. That's great.
I'm surprised. Like, I am surprised that, like, I mean, clearly, like, if there is a God, then like that was like God guiding my hand to that CD. Because, like, I think looking back, I'm like, what? Like, it's just a teenager, basically.
And putting you on the spot. Did you have like a printed thing that you had to read from, or?
No, I just had a friend of mine who, another college student, called me, and he was like, this thing happened and I'm writing it down. And I was like, okay, so this is in Boston? He's like, no, it's in New York, like in Manhattan. And I was like, okay, all right, great, cool, thanks. I will, I'll get it on. And then I hung up the phone and I looked at what I'd written. I was like, oh, this is wild.
And that's going to be a defining moment for your generation, because, all you guys are coming of age when that moment happened in time. And we're still living in the aftermath of that, sadly.
You have been playing hundreds of shows. You said 5,000 shows is maybe like what you're at this point, but 200 shows a year. You've been doing that for a long time. We're talking about like the past and how things have changed in your life and in the world in general. How has your relationship to being a traveler changed over the years? Like, what have been some emotional and practical evolutions for you in traveling?
The best thing that came into my life as a traveler is a cell phone, because that keeps me connected to home, to loved ones, to a GPS system when I'm lost, to restaurants when I need something specific. That's made life incredibly easier. Just the thought of a Rand McNally map unfolding like an accordion and trying to fold it back up again while you're driving.
While you're driving,
all that stuff.
Never mind texting and driving.
Yeah, exactly. Imagine those days. It's so much easier because of that, and I feel so much more connected to the world and less lonely, and that's been pretty remarkable. And the next evolution will be when cars are driving me rather than me driving cars, and where I can work and we can have this conversation while I'm being driven to a show in Philadelphia, and we can be on a highway and having this conversation, which would be, and I wouldn't have to worry about driving, which, and I'll be able to work and write. And because so much of my life, the predominant time spent in my life up until this pandemic has been driving, not playing. This pandemic is really changing everything for me as far as how I spend my time. And I don't think I'll ever get back to touring in the same way. And I'm hoping that some of the, I've had to reinvent myself on the internet, and I'm hoping some of that will stick when life gets a little bit back to normal, because I don't want to be a slave to the road anymore. I don't think it's an effective way to do it. But I do want to do shows. I still want to do 120, 130 shows a year. I just don't want to.
Just cut back a little bit.
I don't want it to be 170, 100, 200, no, thank you.
I want to hear about your experience with, how do you say the syndrome with your hands? Is it?
Dupuytren's syndrome.
Dupuytren's. How does it affect your playing and your life in general?
Well, it has changed my playing a lot. I have it in both hands now, and it's something that can be fixed, but in order to fix it, it involves some pretty serious surgery, and I'd have to take a lot of time off, and there's always a chance that it could take something away, like the use of your fingers in that hand. So I've been reluctant to do it, and I'm just letting it progress. But I can show you it. This is what it looks like. This hand is curled down, and this is as high as that finger can come up.
Oh, wow.
So when I'm playing, I have almost like this zombie finger that just constantly insists on getting in the way. So when I'm holding a flat pick, the only way I can play with a flat pick is to curl my hand, which means my knuckles bleed and I develop calluses in odd places like on knuckles. And when I'm playing piano, it definitely is affecting the amount of play that I can do with my right hand. In guitar, I generally write now without a flat pick, where it used to be the predominant way I'd play guitar. Now I play more flamenco style, and I do a lot of flares with my fingers, and I use these 3 fingers on my thumb instead of using my pinky at all. And I've had to adjust, and I'm hoping at the end of the year that I can take a month or 2 months off and have surgery and have it repaired and get them back. But I'm a little fearful. I had planned surgery, and then Dan Navarro, a friend of mine who's a musician, he had hand surgery and it took him out for 3 months, and he couldn't really make a living on the road as a guitar player, so he had to hire someone, and that freaked me out, so I canceled the surgery. And but now I'm at a point where I really probably should do something about it, at least in my right hand.
Thank you for telling me about it. It's
not because it can be repaired. It's not something that's so serious. It's not certainly not cancer or anything like that, but I'm having to play around it just like I have to play around my voice. And I think this is a lot of, it's age. You end up losing notes off the top of your range when you hit your 50s, and then your body starts doing other things.
Is it a genetic thing?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. And usually handed down from male to male. Occasionally women can pick it up too, but it's pretty rare in women. And but yeah, no one else in my family has it though that I know of.
Your latest album, Storyteller Suitcase, for the first time you took on the role of producer. How did taking that role and working to trust yourself change your relationship to your music?
Well, it was going to be my vision, which is the first time that's ever happened. And I've noticed when I've recorded with other producers that there are moments on the album that are really, really beautiful and blossoming in ways that I couldn't have imagined. And sometimes the songs that are least strong end up being the strongest on the album because of what that producer brings in. And he lifts it to a place, or she lifts it to a place where I didn't know it could go. And I'm left breathless by it. But on the backside of that, there are moments where I'm giving folks songs and we never quite live up to what I'm hearing in my head. And I've always felt like as the artist that I was in a learning seat, working with people that had Grammys on their shelves and players that were far better players than me, producers who are far more experienced in little, aspects of how to put a recording together, like, how to layer instruments and how to use the spectrum of left and right sides and the flavors of certain instruments that I couldn't hear that they'd bring in. But on this time around, I felt like, I don't think I need to be a student right now. I need to be in a lead seat and see what would happen if I controlled every single moment and every instrument's choice and guided the musicians to play what I'm hearing. And so it feels like in many ways, this is the album that I've been working on making my entire life, because the message in the songs is now the message in the sound. And they're partnering in ways that they never have before for a whole record. And I think pound for pound, as the artist, I think it's the best production job on an overall project that I've ever had, as far as making the songs as great as they can be. I don't doubt that if I was working with another producer, we might we might have hit a few songs out of the park in ways that were even better. But I don't think pound for pound, the whole record could have been better with someone else at the helm.
I wanted to ask you a couple questions about two songs on the album that I think, I mean, the record is wonderful, but in particular, I think the song The Innocence and the Afterlife is just like a really lovely, vulnerable song about you explaining the death of your dad to your 5-year-old daughter. How did writing that song impact your view on death and the afterlife?
Well, you know, like every song brings with it a lot of life lessons because you're dissecting some issue or some relationship, and by thinking about it musically and creatively, I think you conquer it a little bit in the process. You know, in process it, maybe get over some things. And I was thinking of like what were some of the most profound conversations you've ever had in your life, as a way of like chasing after song topics. Like meeting someone and having this thing that changed both of you, like a little meaning of the crossroads, so to speak. And I was thinking that like, what was the most profound conversations you've ever had that really a kind of touch and go moment where you come in one way and you leave as another person. And this conversation I had with Ella was like the first one that came up. And then I was like, how do you write about that and not belittle it, you know? Because it was, you're talking to a 5-year-old. You know, but she said the things that she said in that song, because we aren't, her mother and I weren't forcing a religion on her. So she said, basically, she said, where did Papa go where do you go when you die? And I'm like, wow, how do you explain this to a kid who needs an answer right now? Not like, you know, talk to your mother or one of those answers. So I sat her down. I said, look, I'm going to tell you, it depends on who you talk to. This is what people believe. I went through Buddhism and atheism and agnosticism and Catholicism and Christianity and Judaism and being a Muslim. And I went through almost all of the religions, and it was like a half an hour conversation with her. And, you know, I said, the Buddhists believe that you can come back as a living thing, like an animal, like a bird or you know, and if you lived a good life, you get to come back as another living creature. You don't just disappear. And then she said, you know, could I come back as a puppy then? And I said, yes. Yeah. Like that would be something that could actually happen. And then she said, if I came back as a puppy, would I belong to you? And then she was crying, I was crying. And, you know, that was the conversation was incredible, really, and mind-blowing for both of us. And then can you fit that in a 3-minute song and have the effect be what it was in reality, you know? And so I had to take people on a journey from the death of my father to coming home and, you know, talking about missing him and the fact that his ghost was kind of on the ride home with me, and I wanted to talk to him, and we shared the last name. And then the only person that arrived with the same last name as me was my daughter, and she shows up in this place, and then I got to explain this thing to her. And I love the song. I think I got lucky. I didn't feel like I wrote it at all. You know, I felt like I just kind of just said what happened, and people love it. It's certainly, I think, one of the most powerful songs I've ever written. And so thank you for bringing it up.
One of the most Woody Guthrie things you've ever done is write the song The Battle of Charlottesville, which recounts the tragic events of April 12th, 2017, where a neo-Nazi rally took place. A person died, a lot of people got hurt. You were compelled to historically recount what happened. And I read about this, when you play it sometimes, people come up to you after the show and ask you to write from the perspective of like the conservative right.
Right.
Which I was thinking about this question. I wrote this question this morning, and then like I went through my day and was thinking about it. It's like, would you ever go up to somebody after a show and they've played like a breakup song, and then you're like, well, can you write a verse for the other person? You know, it's
right.
like that would be kind of cool, but I definitely don't want to hear a perspective of the right when it comes to that song. But I'm just wondering, like, what goes through, I mean, after I give you my opinion, what goes through your mind when someone brings that up?
Well, what goes through my mind is that I probably sat up there and I sang a dozen songs that was really speaking to their world in a beautiful way. Probably a lot of love songs or story songs that they could attach their life story to. And then I put a song in the set that was opposed to what their beliefs are. And instead of having an ally, suddenly I broke the spell. And that person, rather than giving up on me, walked up to me and said, could you write it from our side? And I think it was sort of an invitation, could you not lose me by writing something that kept me in the picture? And then, the question is, am I writing for them or am I writing for myself and my own perception of what the reality and the good and bad is? But I knew that person wanted to buy my music. She actually, if we're talking about the same event, she was buying my entire catalog on a USB stick. So I knew that I had moved her enough to spend $100 on my entire catalog, but this one thing was bugging her a little bit. It was like a pebble in her shoe, and she wanted to fix it. And, of course I can't do that. And so that's the thing, is like, there are a lot of people that, aren't going to have my same belief systems, but they love certain songs of mine unless it crosses the line of their beliefs. And, my job isn't to please everybody. It's to really, to please my own concept of what I want to be as an artist and write about the things I care about. So, I'm going to lose people along the way, I guess. It's the big lesson from all this, especially now because we're so politicized and we're so divided and cartoonized. I'm sure I'm going to lose people every night that I play that song. And but that's okay. It still needs to be sung, and I'll probably gain 4 fans for every fan I lose. So.
Yeah. All right, Ellis Paul, let's do the lightning round.
Okay. Uh-oh.
Okay.
Is this going to be a Rorschach test kind of thing where you say something, I say something fast back?
Yes, but all of the questions are about you, but they're
Okay.
surface level, easy historical fun facts.
Okay. All right.
Here we go. First song you learned on the guitar.
Oh, okay. Leaving on a Jet Plane.
What is your karaoke song?
My karaoke song. What's the Journey song? The famous one.
Don't Stop Believin'?
Don't Stop Believin'. Yeah, that would be my go-to.
Oh my gosh. I'd love to hear that. Dogs or cats?
Cats. I have to say cats. My girlfriend would kill me if I said dogs. What kind of dogs?
What is your coffee order?
I would say I'll go mocha frappuccino at Starbucks with whip.
Special treat.
Yeah, $5 drink.
What is your favorite U.S. city?
Well, I love Boston. And if I didn't have 30 years in Boston, it would be Boston. I probably would say Chicago, though. Just love Chicago. Don't know why.
First album you bought with your own money?
Oh, was Billy Joel probably. Or you know what? I'll say Chuck Mangione, Feels So Good. That's probably it. 78, 79, somewhere in there.
I don't know who that is.
No millennial's going to know.
I'll have to look it up. Sorry.
That's all right. Imagine the music that you know that I don't. It goes both ways.
What was your first concert?
Oh, Ted Nugent. Oh, no, actually,
my God.
That was my first on my own. That was my first on my own high school concert, only because he was coming to Presque Isle and nobody came to Presque Isle. So he was wearing a Tarzan outfit and came in on a giant, vine.
No.
But my first real concert with my dad was Doc Severinsen, who was the trumpet player from The Tonight Show. And he was playing in the Midwest. And my dad took me when I was 3 in third grade, got me a trumpet the next day.
Whoa.
It's cool. Yeah.
That is
like
cool.
That.
And then you played it.
Yeah.
Do you ever pick it up every now and then?
I do. I got one somewhere floating around within 20 feet of me. There's a trumpet. It doesn't sound good, though. I won't put you through that.
Last book you read?
The biography of Frederick Douglass. I can't remember the name.
Dream collaboration?
I had a friend named David Glazer who passed away about a year and a half ago. My dream would be to have him working with me as a guitar player. He was He passed away just as we were going to do the Storyteller Suitcase and would have done all of the second guitar parts, which I ended up doing on my own.
Wow.
That's the one collaboration I miss because I think we would have had a 10-year, 15-year partnership together traveling around. Other than that, I'd love to just meet with Woody Guthrie and write a song together on purpose instead of getting one of his stray songs.
Flying or invisibility?
Yeah, that's tough. I think invisibility. Just like to go anywhere I wanted. But I love flying, so it's tough. But yeah, invisibility. I could sneak in places. I could sneak in on that Donald Trump Postmaster General meeting at the White House that just happened. Find out whether that guy was commanded to take the postal system down.
It's a very specific request with your invisibility.
Yeah, I know. I'm wasting it on that stuff. Are you kidding me?
Okay, here we go. Last one. Make it count.
Okay.
Where's the most beautiful place you've ever visited?
Okay. There's a tie. Almost anywhere in Alaska. Northern Italy. And then there's a bluff in Big Sur overlooking the Pacific Ocean. And that's kind of my go-to place where I just need to think of a place in my head where everything disappears and it's just you and a vista. There's this bluff overlooking the Pacific at the very top of the cliffs in Big Sur looking down. It's gorgeous.
Wow.
Yeah.
Those are good.
Thank you.
You've done great here.
Oh, you've done great. This is so nice. Really. It's great to have known you for so long and watch the evolution of you continue to grow, and good for you. It's awesome.
Thank you. That means a lot. Yeah. I mean, you've always been a favorite of mine, so it's a real honor to have you on.
Oh, thank you.
You guys, Basic Folk this week was produced by Sarah Wardrop. Wow. Thanks, Sarah, for producing. Lindsay Myers is our business manager. Alex Stanton of Townspeople does our music. Basic Folk is proud to be on the American Songwriter Podcast Network. You can take a listen to all of the episodes of Basic Folk wherever you get podcasts. Rate, review, subscribe, tell your mom and your dad about it. You can also find it at my website, cindyhouse.net. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you later. Bye.